Felicity, how are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you. A bit cold down here, but it looks like it's equally cold there.
Yeah, Joburg, winter is never a strong point for us. We always get so surprised when the temperature dips at this time of year. But basically, what I have is a group of people who watched our conversation that we had based on your contributions to the State of South Africa's Fatherhood Report 2021. So I'm not going to be asking you questions because I've pretty much exhausted that in our session. But the intent of this is to basically shed to light the topic that we discussed and have the audience then interact with you. So maybe as an icebreaker, I would like for anyone to go first to just share their initial thoughts about what they thought about the conversation with Felicity, just so she can see you.
Sure, sure. So you're gonna hold it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi, Felicity. My name is Mosala.
Hi there. Hi.
Yeah. Firstly, you know, big, big thanks to you for embarking your time in life in helping the challenges in our society. So, just to say thank you. The question that I have for me, what was interesting was the cultural nuance and the unintended consequences. In things of, especially when say the families will say, we don't recognize him as a father yet because he hasn't paid damages, etc. And as a result, it creates this issue of, because damages are not paid, it creates this ripple effect. Now, what I want to understand from you, firstly, is from a department or whatever, from your engagements, is our government working on taking those nuances, the cultural nuances, into account? Because you would imagine that the black government will be in touch with such nuances, but actually is becoming doing disservice to families and take into account the cultural nuances. So, is any progress, is any talks around that?
Not to my knowledge, but I think unintentionally they are trying to navigate that through mediation. So that's very broad, because who would do the mediation? I mean, if it's an ordinary alternative disputes resolution practitioner, it would have to be somebody who's culturally aware, who speaks the language, and then also to be aware of all of the other dynamics that are not necessarily cultural but more gendered. So not to my knowledge, have there been very specific discussions or even possible guidelines around that. And I think it's very problematic, because it certainly does cause, it causes a social perception that you cannot approach the courts. And then the flip side of that is, it's not cultural to approach the courts, but the impact of that is that it opens itself up to be used as a tool to either avoid responsibility, or if there is a history of some kind of abuse, to perpetuate that abuse, whether it's by the two parties or by extended family.
There you go.
Hi guys, thank you again for the report. I think if you guys didn't cover it as well as you did, we'd be having many more questions just to try and understand more and deeper into the context. So you guys did a good cover in the Q&A and how you guys engaged. So I think I do have some questions, but I just thought of one now while I was just sitting back to that. I think the approach should be the same, but what happens when there's a kid who was adopted and then the parents suddenly separate? does the legality, does the process also engage them into the same process to follow, or has there been any communication regarding this? Maybe that's the first question.
No. Okay, to answer that question, a child who is adopted legally in South Africa is considered to be born to those parents. So the regulations would apply to that child. In fact, just at that point, I just want to mention that the amendments to the Maintenance Act that are under discussion, in fact, expands on that not just the primary parents will be able to apply for maintenance, but for example, in some cultures, grandparents are a very strong part of raising children in the absence of their parents for various reasons, that it would open the door for them to be able to approach the courts. Doesn't really answer your, apply specifically to that, but the same process would have to be followed. Paternity would have to be proven, and in the case of adoption papers provided.
Okay. And maybe I think touching base on sometimes where speaking about when you guys spoke that the birth certificate, the father is not as part of the acknowledged person on the birth certificate. Sometimes with understanding, because you guys were in a partnership and then you're raising, and only to find out later that you're not the biological father. So does the man, I'm just trying to figure out as to, has there been any voice from both sides to hear how people feel about it, as to how do you consider, because firstly, you've built a relationship with the child, now you have to step away, or maybe you're allowed to continue because maybe their father's not there, because being a father is different. It's not just because you are the sort of sperm donor or whatever, but you have a relationship with the child. So how does that get looked at? And also with maybe let's say the toxic masculinity of being a man, sometimes you just carry on, or with the gender roles that people are fighting for, where, you know, women sometimes get empowered and then the man starts feeling emasculated and walks away. Now in those relationships, has there been voices from both sides, maybe women voicing themselves to say how they feel about such situations where now the man feels that, like you said, that because he cannot provide better, he starts walking away, stepping away from his responsibility because he feels like he's a failure. But then the woman again as well, because there's less communication, she might be able to still keep the relationship going, but because there's communication of failure, you know, I wish there was a way where both parties would help each other. But then I think coming back to the point to saying, how does maybe with mediation, does the government try and look at counseling first before they look at the processes of just who can pay how much? You know, because I think when there's communication, maybe the woman can afford, you know, to take care of both. But because now we're expecting you to pay maintenance, therefore it starts becoming a difficult sort of relationship to build. Sorry, I think we lost Felicity there.
Maybe you can re-ask the question. One thing.
So much I can't remember. Yes. Hi, Felicity.
No, I
Okay,
got the question.
perfect.
Let's go. Okay, so I got the gist of your question. So interesting. I had a situation recently where a friend of a mother asked this question, that the
Be careful.
mum was married and she had an affair, and the child resulted from the affair. The biological father of the child, knew that he was the biological father and had been providing financially for the child. And as a result of the contribution, the child was able to go to a private school, okay? The biological father never even knew about this other man. But the problem now is the mother passed away last year. And the situation is that the present father is having to downgrade the child's circumstances because he can't afford it. His understanding was that the money was coming through his wife's employment, but it was not. The biological father has also got married. So you can see it's quite a messy situation. And the advice sought was, what do I do in this situation? Um, and and I think this is far more common than what we like to believe, that whether it's, people are married or not. And first of all, I think that from a personal point of view, but also from a short term, that might sound like it's okay to get away with it. But if we look at it long term, we can't determine what's going to happen in the future. And the truth will come out, and the truth needs to be known, because just say, for example, if there's a medical emergency and they go to the parents first, and to discover that way that it's not your child, the amount of trauma that it creates, but it also doesn't solve the medical problem. Adults can figure this stuff out. They're going to be angry with each other, and there's betrayal and a whole lot of stuff that comes with that. But if we look at the harm on the child, who's the innocent party in this, how does a child deal with that kind of information? Because the child doesn't know the biological father, only knows the father who has fathered it. And is the child old enough to decide to stay with that father, or does it really want to? Is it too angry that it just doesn't want to have anything to do with any of them? And those are the consequences that people don't think about when they do not determine paternity or they hide paternity. Out of marriage, if you go to the maintenance court, paternity is part of the process. You either sign it by consent, or if you say, I'm not sure that I'm the parent, then you have to undergo a DNA test. However, if you are married, you're not required, because it's assumed that you are the parents. But the situation that the example I've just explained is a very good example that it's not necessarily. So we find often that people who get divorced after 15 years still ask for paternity tests. So for the party that knows that they have never cheated, it is an insult. I mean, if my husband were to say to me after 15 years, I don't think that's my children, and I'd never been anywhere out of my bed, I would feel terribly insulted. And I would have to ask, why are you asking that question? But then again, I know I haven't, but my husband is fairly convinced. So are his intentions based on rumor, fact, anger, vengefulness? We don't know. Sometimes we can't always figure these emotions out, can we? They're complex. I mean, I think every time we unpack these family matters, we just open up another layer.
Hi, Felicity. This topic is very close to me and my life experiences. So I think my question will come from a child's perspective. Legally and court-wise, or the courts, how do they take the child's opinion or feelings into consideration when it comes to whether granting maintenance or custody, or how you mentioned that there's two different, there's maintenance and then there's also like I'm going to call it custody because I can't remember what you call it, but like the visitation and being involved, co-parenting, like being involved, there's that legal entity on its own, but then how much do the courts consider the child's opinion when it comes to such things? Like, if the child is outrightly saying they don't want to be involved in whatever parent's life, and they choose to be with one parent and that's the only parent they choose to be, but the other parent is still fighting, like what legal implications does that have? Does that hold bound in the courts? Does that hold weight in the courts? I think I hope I made.
So let me deal with the co-parenting issue first, okay? So in the Children's Act, which the Children's Act applies to anything pertaining to the child, there's a provision in the Children's Act that says that the voice of the child needs to be heard in every instant concerning the child. but that would be based on, one, the child's age and the child's maturity and its ability to articulate its thoughts and its feelings. Okay. So in co-parenting, which is a common scenario, they would appoint a social worker to establish why the child does not want to have a relationship with the other parent, because there is a term that is very loosely used and it's quite controversial, called parent alienation. And I say that because it has been debunked by the United Nations in terms of it being a syndrome. And there's often gatekeeping that is mispresented or misrepresented as parent alienation. And parent alienation has also been proven to be used as another abusive tool to counteract domestic abuse allegations. So I'm just qualifying that in that. And that's a whole discussion board on its own. So the courts would, because they do take it very seriously, the courts would investigate to see why the child does not want to have a relationship, because one of the premises of the Children's Act is as well for a child to have a relationship with both parents. Well, it's a child's right to have a relationship with both parents. But it's, again, and I have to say this, that there seems to be an overarching inclination to force the child to have a parent with both, a relationship with both parents, irrespective of the child's feelings or whatever allegations are raised. And again, globally, there's a big movement pushing back against that, because that is not necessarily in the child's best interest. Because if a child's voice is denied, what are you teaching that child from a young age? That you can't go to the highest authority for help because nobody's going to listen to you. So or in a lot of other situations in their lives, if they try and speak about injustices or if they have feelings, who are they going to trust to go to actually hear them and validate their feelings, as opposed to diminishing them? And that is a very big problem for many people who work in this sector, because we, particularly globally, it's a global problem, but we see it in South Africa, and we have to consider those harms that it causes, because that is not really being discussed at the moment. And then in maintenance, so if the child's voice has to be heard, they will not entertain it in the maintenance courts, because they say these are big people's problems and children shouldn't get involved in big people's problems. But here's the thing, that the Maintenance Act is based on the best interests of the children, and all the provisions are there for somebody to provide for that child. But there are no provisions in that act to protect the person who is meant to receive the money, that the primary parent gets the money by default by protecting the child's rights, which is problematic because the child does not have locus standi in the court. The child cannot appear in court to enforce its rights. So it's really nonsensical, very contradictory. And I mean, I've dealt with quite a number of children, and in fact, I have a video from a child who witnessed his mother's journey going through the maintenance courts over a 9-year period. And the video that he makes is heartbreaking. One, his feelings, because it kind of reaffirmed the rejection from his father, but two, that he could not protect his mother, that he could not alleviate her pain, and he also felt a sense of responsibility for the impacts of a dysfunctional maintenance courts that it was having on his mother. So, and again, you know, we need to talk about these things because they're real and it's happening. Children are not stupid. The onus is placed on the parents to protect and shield the children. But if a child keeps coming to the primary parent and says, I need food, or we're out of food, or I need basic things like new sports clothes or school uniform or a school book, or the rest of my class is going on a school trip, we need money, and the answer is no all the time, the child is going to avoid asking. and it's going to internalize that. And how do you protect the child? Make up a story, make up a lie to protect the other parent? And you also, in my opinion, creating an illusion of what the other parent is. You know, but again, you know, we have to be cognizant of a child's emotional maturity, and we have to be responsible in the way that we communicate these impasses with our children so that we do not create more trauma for our children.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Hi Felicity, how are you?
Thanks for you.
I'm good, thank you. So Felicity, I just want to know from your point of view. So we obviously have this big thing about Father's Day and Mother's Day, right? But where do you think we are right now as a society or as a country when it comes to the term deadbeats? Especially when it's addressed to fathers, because I don't think that that title should be only applied on men only, because women are deadbeat mothers themselves because they deprive so many men access to their kids. But where are we right now in terms of understanding that men are entitled to see their kids just as much as mothers are depriving them? But do you understand or know where we are currently? Because mothers literally just like brainwash their kids in terms of allowing them to see their fathers, and I think that it takes away a lot from a man's perspective, and it doesn't really give them any, what can I say, I don't know what word to use actually. Sorry? Yeah, so I don't know, but can you at least just help me in understanding as to where do you think we are right now as a society when it comes to addressing men as deadbeat dads?
I'm going to just send this voice note to answer the last question. I think that deadbeats is used far too loosely, and yes, both parents can be deadbeats. And I think that in order for somebody to be a real deadbeat, that they must show no desire to be involved in their child's life, whether it's to parents or to contribute financially, because what are they prepared to do? I mean, they're literally prepared to walk away from their responsibilities. Whether deadbeat is the right term, I'm also not too sure, because it's got such a negative connotation, and it doesn't really encourage anybody to want to change their behavior. But if we look at the other contributions in the State of the Fatherhood report, and you know, if a father is unemployed, for example, and he can't provide, and he has continuously tried to find employment, to be called a deadbeat is hurtful, and it's hardly motivating to do anything different once he does find employment, because he's already been labelled, right? But again, you know, that can't just be an excuse, because the child has a need. And I think one thing that we really need to ask of government, particularly, and our communities and our families, is what intervention is taking place. Because whether if a mother's a deadbeat, to use that term, social services intervene pretty quickly. So deadbeat, the same, you know, definition would be not parenting and not financially providing. Social services jump in pretty quickly and they intervene. But there is very little intervention where fathers are not parenting, and it's in person and financially. And I think we need to put more pressure on government to focus on the intervention, because it's something, because it has not been addressed, is getting worse, and we need to be cognizant of that. And in the absence of intervention and social change and behavioral change and changing our thoughts and how we narrate things, it's going to get worse.
The funny thing about our society is that when it's Mother's Day,
It's
we
a big
celebrate
celebration.
about
Yes.
mothers. And I don't even hear men say, yeah, I'm also a mother, because there are some real fathers out there. But when it's Father's Day, mothers want to raise their hand to say, yes, I'm a mother and a father at the same time because I'm supporting. And if we celebrate each other, because we are all unique in our ways, we are as important to the children. We shouldn't say I'm the better parent or not. Yes, there are situations that we need to do. But very often, I see every year, on Father's Day, mothers will always want to put themselves that yes, I'm also this. No, I don't think that's the case. I don't think we see them that way. I don't see a man who says on Mother's Day like, I'm also a single father, therefore no, we don't. But anyway, it's our society, it's the social ills that we're looking at. And I wish it was different. I wish we just respected and celebrated each other. That's all. I know times are challenging, and I think the next question I wanted to get to Felicity is that, with this maintenance, things that are going on, and with the cost of living rising, do they review some of the contributions? Or someone would pay 1,000 rand for the last 5 years and say, but I'm paying. And meanwhile, the child feels that the mom is struggling or the other parent is struggling. Do they understand some of the challenges? Or do they ever get to review to say inflation, CPI, whatever is happening, how does raising that child help each other? Because when two parents are fighting, the other one sticks on the process. They said I must pay 1,000 and I'm paying 1,000. So why are you bothering me? Or such. But, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone want to build on these points? I'm going to give it 2 more minutes. And then unfortunately we're going to need to move on. So if I can't get Felicity back. But it's a good discussion.
I think it should be reviewed based on the fact that because there's also this whole stigma, I don't even know if it is a stigma, based on the fact that if a woman goes to court to fight maintenance, and it's a woman, I'll put this in quotation marks, she's seen as the right person because we don't consider the man. The man is always at fault, but like you said, it's something that should be reviewed, and I personally agree with it, that it should be reviewed against both parties, whereas women shouldn't always be seen as they are in favor because it's a woman that is now addressing a matter in court to say that my partner is not supporting my child, this is what I want to do, this is what he should be doing, and then the court agrees in her favor. So I agree with your statement, that is something that should personally be reviewed. I don't know what you want to add on.
I think my question is to the point about the role of fathers. It's very interesting, this whole discussion. The gendered nature of parenthood is very interesting to me, especially when we talk about kind of like parental absenteeism and who is absent and the reasons why they are absent. So I think my question is more to the men in the room. How do they feel as though their upbringings prepared them for fatherhood? Because I think that women are very much raised to be mothers from a very young age. And part of the reason why there's a lot of avoidance when it comes to men and their responsibilities is because maybe they don't feel prepared, or maybe they don't feel that they are equipped enough to deal with the responsibility. And you can individualize it, but I think it's a systemic issue, which goes back to patriarchy. So I don't know if anyone is comfortable with answering that question. If they felt that when they became a father, that they were prepared to take on a responsibility, or if they have aspirations to parenthood and to fatherhood, if they are prepared to take on that responsibility, and what that responsibility entails for them personally.
Come on.
So, I think what I like about your question is that you're asking, it's a matter of what's our perspective. Like you didn't come with a statement to say, this is what men do. Okay? So, normally, you grow from what you see your uncles and your fathers do. But there's times where I think with families where the father would go to the mine or go somewhere very far to make a living for the family, right? And then you see that the young man or the young adult starts taking from what they learn from the streets, depending which society that you come from or community you come from. So the norms that you adopt, it's more of what you get from the community. And if there's good role models, it's easier for you to pick up and want to learn more about what they do, so that you can sort of try to, your behavioral pattern would allow you to see that's how they treat their children, that's how they treat their family, that's how they treat their wives, their partners. And then you build on that. When you come from a community where you don't see that, it's a lot of confusion as well. Then it comes with that whole thing again, like I was mentioning, the toxic masculinity, where now you're thinking a man must. And when you have that opportunity to discuss with your partner will not be heard because a man must. This is what you learn from the communities to say that you cannot back down, you cannot do this, and that. So personal experience is that I'm fortunate that I grew up in a household where there's a father. Even though he was strict, I learned some of my behavioral things from him. And he was also dominant as a family structure. He believed in family. Anything would happen, but if it's family, it comes first. So that's where we learn some of these things. And I've known families where there was a single parent, a mother, but their kids also grew up well. My best friend, who was also, I was his best man, his mom passed away just last year. He was raised by a single mom, but they had a good relationship, so they're allowed to talk. He adopted from the uncles, so the uncles played roles as their father, so it actually went well for him. So it's not just about me. So I give 2 examples. From a person who was raised by a single parent, and from me who I had both parents, right? But the uncles played the role of the father, so they're bridging the gap. And I admire them, even to this day, when there's a function in that family, everybody comes in. The uncles comes with their kids. Everybody. It's like it's a tradition that they do. Whether it's a party, everybody comes together. So I think it's not just about me being a father. It's about what roles we play as uncles, as brothers. So that's important.
So much, guys. But I need to be timekeeper because I made a commitment about getting you guys out in time. On this topic. So we're not able to get Felicity back, but because she's based in Cape Town, she's more than willing at some point in the future to come here in person and for us to unpack, because I think there's definitely different layers and things that we need to discuss, and I think also it'll be quite a productive discussion to have now that we've started the seeds of it when we recruit others to come in.